Welcome to Labour Grassroots. Today we are going to be discussing how we can beat media bias. Now, I don't think there's much doubt that we do have media bias. We've seen for the last 5 years that Jeremy Corbyn has been under constant attack from the media. We've had distinctions made between moderates and hard left. So socialists are hard left and those who aren't are moderate. We can't even really trust newspapers like The Guardian or the New Statesman to give socialism a fair hearing, as we've noticed in the past 5 years as well. And we've seen the BBC's licence fee threatened by the Tories, and that's obviously had an impact on the way they're presenting the news. And now we've got Andrew Neil and Rupert Murdoch coming forward with a new news channels for just to make it even harder for us. So I did a survey that went out to everyone in the last couple of days to find out what people think the media's impact is. Over 800 people responded to the survey, and the finding of the survey is that only 2% of those who are on the mailing list believe that media bias has nothing to do with making it impossible to form a socialist government or to have a socialist government. So is there any doubt that there is media bias? Well, I think someone who might know a lot about this worked for the communications of Jeremy Corbyn as his advisor. James Schneider, are you there?
I am, yeah, hi.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious there is media bias. Would you disagree with that?
Oh no, they're just seeking truth from facts. It's a purely truth game, and there's no bias whatsoever. No, yeah, of course there are. There's an absolute, there's a plethora, there's a huge amount, there's an ocean of academic research which lays out the different biases that there are in the British media and where they come from. So we've got a printed press which is owned overwhelmingly by 3 billionaires. Their interests, both directly and indirectly, inform the editorial judgments of the press, and then those papers help shape the broadcast agenda, which is then what most people see. Then you've also got with the BBC. The BBC, of course, produces some brilliant things, and some parts of it are excellent, but it's far from free from government interference and sort of tacit control. You mentioned the charter renewal thing. So every few years, the BBC needs to get its money for the next few years to keep on running. And that's part of a negotiation with the government. So the government can lean on it this way and that. And the other thing is the government gets to appoint the chairperson of the BBC. So they just appointed a new chairperson. You would have thought they would go for, somebody with a rich history in journalism, in public interest, public sector kind of person, and of course they have, because they've got Rishi Sunak's old boss, who's a banker who's donated 400 grand to the Tories. So you can see that, for all of the protestations about the ethics of journalism, and I think the ethics of journalism are incredibly important, and those values are something that lots of people hold on to, because we want to have a media, and lots of journalists go into the media hoping that what they'll do is shine a light on wrongdoing, challenge the powerful, and therefore basically be an agent for the many, not the few in it. But they're working in institutions which are either straightforwardly forces for the few, forces for billionaires, or they have a huge status quo bias. That's what the BBC has. I don't think the BBC has a right-wing bias. It's got a status quo bias.
Right. Now, can I ask you a personal question?
Of course.
Have you got any examples when you were working for Jeremy Corbyn of bias that stand out for you?
I mean, they're just like too many to think of. But I mean, so one that relates to the status quo bias thing was when Keir Starmer was elected leader of the party last year. Laura Koonsberg, the BBC political editor, tweeted something like, this is really significant because basically the country is going to have an effective opposition again, and whatever your politics are, it's really important there's an effective opposition. I tweeted back at her saying, actually, since 1945, the opposition that defeated the government the most times was led by Jeremy Corbyn. And she said, oh, no, that was all to do with Brexit. And actually, it's only something like 7 or 9 of the 45 votes that were won were under Boris Johnson and were, at that end to do with Brexit. So, I mean, there you see this idea of, what an opposition is meant to do, what structural role is it meant to play in basically holding up the artifice of rule in the country, how it's meant to hold up the system. Then other ones they were like really annoying ones. Of course, they're the absurd ones, like things that are just like straightforwardly grotesque lies, like Jeremy Corbyn is a Czechoslovak spy whose handler organised Live Aid and the Wembley concert to free Nelson Mandela. That sort of, that stuff's almost quite fun. It's so out there and kooky. But more annoying things were when, we'd have something genuinely important to say that lots of people care about, and then it wouldn't get covered because apparently it wasn't newsworthy. So, I mean, like one example that I remember is we had announcing a policy which was about taking all buses that they could come into public ownership, run by the council, basically like we've got in London. And buses in London are amazing. Buses most other places are terrible, more expensive, worse service, all the rest of it. So we were saying they could come into public ownership, and we would incentivize councils to do it by saying that they could give cheaper fares and free fares to young people. And this wasn't covered on the morning news, BBC Morning News, wasn't on the Today programme, that sort of thing. And so you can see what things are judged to be newsworthy and what things aren't judged to be newsworthy are also based in the kind of reality that editors and producers have. And that generally is against those of radical transformation or or real change socialist policies.
Right. Okay. We've got loads of people coming on the call. I'd love to talk to you for a bit more. If you can stay till the end, that would be great to listen to everyone else. But thank you for coming on, and thank you for all you did for Labour. And
thanks for having me.
Time. Thanks, James.
Nice to see you all.
And I'm going to bring in Hilary Wainwright now, because Hilary has been doing an alternative media with Red Pepper for quite some time. And I'd like to know the context of this media bias. I remember when I was growing up that Michael Foot was ridiculed constantly for being old and having a stick and all that kind of thing. Has it been as bad as this for that long, Hilary, or is it getting worse, the media bias?
Well, you talk to me as if I'm a sort of very learned and very ancient person.
But you've got a lot of books.
Yeah, well,
a lot of books.
Well, I was looking when you warned me that you were going to ask me to do this before talking later about Red Pepper. Although this is, one of the reasons why I got involved in setting up Red Pepper, is that, one of the first things that struck me, I wrote this book about the Labour Party after the defeat of Ben, really. I wrote it in 1980, I think 86, but it was after the defeat of 1983, which was, completely. I mean, it was very, very similar to the attack on Jeremy. I mean, it was at that point the leadership was quite, it was. I can't remember who was before Foot.
Callaghan.
Yes. So I mean, the leadership was still, as it were, in the hands of Callaghan. But then Michael Foot came in, and then the thing that really, got the establishment was the manifesto, the 1983 manifesto, which was called by Gerald Kaufman, who was a Labour leader, actually, the longest suicide note in history, implying that it was way too left for the public, and therefore, Labour was committing suicide by presenting such radical policies. And I firstly, tried to look at that question of, what is public opinion? And here there's a very similar phenomenon to what happened under Jeremy, because actually public opinion, when you looked at the polls, and including very, respectable studies by people like John Curtis, but talking about the polls first, you had polls which in 83 was saying that 74% of working class voters agreed that government should give workers more say in running the place they work. You know, and in the manifesto there was that commitment to industrial democracy. 61% agreed that income and wealth should be redistributed. 58% supported the reunification of Ireland, and over 55% were in favour of nuclear disarmament. And then also they went on to in their book, they went on to say that actually all the policies of the manifesto were quite popular. So that, and then similarly with Jeremy, as James will remember, you know, the policies of the manifesto, well, both in 2017, they've proven very popular. And when the party, you know, persisted, particularly with public ownership, I mean, the figures on public ownership were really striking, you know, 73% agreeing that energy should be brought back into public hands. Similarly with railways, you know, every aspect of public ownership was popular. So that leads to the question of, you know, what was the role of the media in, or how do you explain how the party itself became so unpopular, both in 2019 and in 1983. And I think it's to do with there's the general bias against the left, but there's a particular way in which the media fall in with the establishment or become a kind of accompaniment, an instrument of the establishment in stopping a socialist government. I mean, the point about 83 was that there was a radical manifesto. There was a leader who the establishment thought was kind of like weak, would be a pushover for the left, who dominated the National Committee and had drawn up this manifesto, and that you get a socialist government. Similarly with Jeremy and John McDonnell, that would be a socialist government that would be completely, you know, upsetting to the union, the city, all the sort of institutions of the British establishment. And the point about that establishment is that it's very centralized, and the media is very centralized, highly monopolized. In that sense, it's hardly a free press, hardly the press that Milton and the sort of radical Democrats of the early British, you know, the British Revolution stood for. And in a way, they know each other. So one doesn't have to imply a sort of plot. It's just that they kind of work together. They see each other in clubs, in different, you know, settings. And they fell in line. So their tactic in both cases was to divide the party. And
right.
A divided party can never win. So that's what happened in 2000.
So you think there's a kind of consistency that, you know, when Labour's radical, they'll come after Labour. Sorry, you've got a cough there.
Can I just get some water? Sorry.
That's all right. I'll come back to you later. I'll come back to you later. It seems there's a consistency, and that the media don't go after Labour when there's a kind of centrist Labour Party, but they will as soon as there's someone like Michael Foot or Jeremy Corbyn who's going against the grain. So what I thought I'd do is we'll start to talk about how we can combat this seemingly impenetrable bias from the media.
Sorry, Chris.
So I'm just going to move on. I'll come back to you later, Hilary.
Yeah.
We'll speak to you a bit later. I'm just wondering if I could get, is that, are you there, Steve Walker? I'm just trying to get hold of Steve Walker. Steve, are you there, Steve?
Hi, mate. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
So, you know, your Skwawkbox and Socialist Telly, but Skwawkbox was the first initiative that I think I've seen of you doing. What was the reason behind that? And how much do you think the media, is possible to defeat the media?
Well, it's a big question. I mean, the only thing I know is we won't defeat them unless we try. So we've got to try, really, because the other option is just to sit back and let them continue with their misinformation non-stop and without challenge. So, I mean, the genesis of Skwawkbox in the very first instance was about trying to correct. Well, I didn't set it up specifically to try to correct something, but the first thing that put it on the map was the Stafford Hospital scandal, so to speak, where the media was doing its echo box job of amplifying everything the Tories claimed about the so-called 1,200 needless deaths in Stafford Hospital. And I thought, well, I better look into that because I'm interested in the NHS. Got into the details and found out that essentially it was all made up. It was a statistical artifact that they were using to try to weaken Labour's stronghold in on the position of the NHS. And unlike most of the journalists, until later on when they finally caught on to what I was doing, I went to Stafford. I went and talked to the people directly. I went, rather than just parrot what the Tories were putting out in press releases, I investigated what was actually going on and found out that it was bad statistics and the fact that the hospital had sacked all the coders who were saying how sick people were when they came in, that was making the death statistics look worse than they really were. So that was where it all kicked off.
What do you think the problems are for countering the media? What are the main problems for you, for example? I mean, I think that there's a lack of money around the left-wing media. I mean, don't seem to have the money that the Tory media have. So
yeah, I mean, the big difference is billionaires. Yeah. I don't think we're ever going to get billionaires on side, and I'd be worried if we did. But we need to find ways to resource it adequately to actually get enough of a presence out there, able to bypass the social media essentially, and get out through onto people's TV packages and that kind of stuff. And start running our own, what the papers say kind of shows. So we're not just picking right-wing rags every day and giving them airtime, and be able to make enough noise that people start to pay attention. The problem with that, obviously, one is resource. The other thing is that the people who run most of the channels to get out to people also tend to be extremely capitalist and interested in making a profit, and therefore not necessarily interested in something that threatens to equalize the conditions of people in the country and level up, so to speak. So, we've seen this just this week, a report get released against myself and the Canary, run by the lovely Lord Man, as he likes to style himself, and using a university with a bit of a questionable history to construct the idea that the Canary and the Skwawkbox are essentially equivalent to right-wing neo-Nazi sites as a means of trying to attack us and ultimately, I'm sure, try to shut us down. So, however, the more threatening we get, the more likely we are to get attacked, and the further that they'll go to try to stop us. I mean, if you look at the 2019 election compared to 2017, apart from the Labour's U-turn on the Brexit issue, the key difference really was the fact that the BBC stopped even trying to make a token show of any kind of impartiality. In 2017, they gave Labour reasonable coverage, and unexpectedly for them, it all turned out to be very popular. But in 2019, they abandoned that completely and just went for the throat on everything. And presumably, if they were worried at all about what Ofcom and other kind of regulatory influences might say, they thought, well, we'll deal with that afterwards. The first priority is stop Corbyn. And that's when you're dealing with people who are extremely unprincipled. You just have to be resolute and keep going. Whether we can win it or not, who knows? But his name's just gone out of my head. But Bob Crow said, didn't he, that if you fight, you might lose. If you don't fight, you definitely lose. And I think that's the situation that we're in.
If I can just come in here, I mean, I think what you do and what all the other people that are coming on this call do is very heroic, because you probably get lots of personal attacks, and you're under threat personally from people who don't like what you're doing. It's quite a difficult thing to do, and very brave of you to keep doing this. And
I don't know about brave. I mean, I think it's, you know, the situation is really, what's the choice? You know, the choice is let them get away with it or try and stop them. I can usually gauge how well I'm doing my job by how many people are trying to, you know, nobble or end me in some way or another. But that's just the cost of doing business. It's part of the gig.
Yeah, and it's not, and also there's a lot of snobbery amongst sort of like the paid journalists who say, oh, you don't. But if you're sort of running an operation where you have to get the news out, rebuttals quickly, you can't do long researched articles on how someone's said something that's incorrect. You've got to be quite quick. You're very quick at coming out with rebuttals, aren't you? On
Yeah,
your...
it's not even a question of time, although that plays a big part in it. But the reality is, you know, that I'm trying to reach people with, you know, to get some kind of information. You know, it's like when I used to be, you know, when I was a kid and I'd want to neck a chocolate bar and then run out and play with my friends. And my mother would desperately be trying to get anything healthy down me that she could get down my neck before I went out the door. And people have got this diet of constant misinformation from the mainstream media. And I can either try to, you know, sit down and deliver them a, you know, 4-course meal that's all been prepared by hand and takes a long time to prepare, but a long time to consume as well. Or I can give them something short that's at least going to get them some information across there to counter what, you know, stuff they're hearing that is going to mislead them. So I took a conscious, I used to do a lot of long form, extremely detailed, thoroughly kind of explained items. And I took a, you know, when Jeremy became the leader of the Labour Party, I took a conscious decision to really not dumb anything down, but just condense and shorten and, you know, use the most basic, you know, kind of ordinary working class language. I can write a flowery sentence that'll do my ego good and maybe, you know, impress the half dozen people who might read it, but I'd much rather put a pithy sentence across and get that read by a lot of people than change somebody's mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I mean, I think the thing is, it's such a big thing to do, to take on the media, that it's really important that we all encourage each other, and there's a feeling of that we're all supportive of you and everyone else who's doing this. So, I mean, if it's possible to give Steve a clap, please do. And I'm going to move on to Lamia, who's with the Morning Star. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, I can. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I know you're busy. Now,
You're welcome.
Can you tell us a bit about the Morning Star? I mean, the Morning Star's been around for quite a while. How well is it doing at the moment in terms of readership and stuff?
Yeah, so the Morning Star has been around for a long, long time, since the 1930s, when it was started as the Daily Worker. And then it went on to be rebranded into the Morning Star. And obviously, since the days of the Daily Worker, circulation is much smaller. I think at the moment, I think my editor told me recently that our circulation is in 10,000. We don't know what the latest figures are with the lockdown, but we do know that lockdown has affected it quite a bit. And but in good news, our digital version of the paper has, you know, become way more popular during lockdown, because obviously people couldn't get to the shops over the last year. So that's become quite a big success in comparison. And so that's the Morning Star. We are mainly read by the trade union movement and the labour movement. So we usually focus on stories about politics, trade union matters, strikes, protests, and obviously from a left-wing socialist perspective.
And there are sort of features on our arts and culture and football and boxing in there, and all sorts of other stuff as well. So that's quite. Do you think that's important to not just talk about politics?
Definitely, yeah, because I think, who was it? I think it was one of the members of the royal family who used to read the Morning Star just for the racing tips. So there is quite a bit of appeal in that sense. Our commie chef is quite good, our recipe section. And yeah, sport is, you know, we do take a more political angle with sport, but we do have quite a rich arts and books section for reviews and things like that, so that's good.
I mean,
Keeps it more, you know, variety is good.
I mean, I was looking at the Daily Herald that was formed by George Lansbury in the beginning of last century, and that was so big at some points that it was like the largest circulation, and eventually became the Sun newspaper, which is quite a sad story, really. But that was a lot to do with combining politics and other stuff. So, you know, do you think that it's, you know, that the Morning Star could become a bigger, because it's not that many pages. I mean, do you think if it got bigger, it could take off?
Well,
can I tell you something else? I can't get hold of it sometimes. It's sold out where I go. So, you know, there is a demand there.
It is quite an elusive paper. I think McColl's and Co-op are the main sellers. It is actually sold in Waitrose in some areas. In my local area, it's sold in Waitrose, which is, yeah, you wouldn't think so. But yeah, so the reason why it's so thin is because we don't have a lot of adverts, because we don't really have adverts from, you know, corporations like Tesco, you know, Asda and things like that, who would usually put adverts in other papers. So it's quite thin because we don't have huge adverts. And but it is quite content rich in terms of news and other things. And what was the other thing that you mentioned?
Well, it's just, I mean, I'm just wondering if it's possible to build. Does it need funding? If there was more funding, would it become a more successful, bigger? And
yeah, I mean, we've got a fighting fund, which, you know, makes up quite a bit of our income, and I think that is a problem that a lot of media is seeing recently, is that, you know, the issue with money. And you know, you're seeing new media at the moment, which is quite exciting, that are using like Patreon, you know, donation models, you know, sort of like fighting funds like the Morning Star, you know, as well as traditional advertising and, you know, classified adverts. But yeah, money is an issue. It always is an issue, especially now with, you know, the Labour Party is coming more right, towards the right a little bit more. Our core readership, I think, you know, rely on us a lot more right now for, you know, reporting those things. Yeah, but the issue is money. There is the readers I think are there, but it's just getting to the readers. So I think expanding digitally is the way to go. And we are expanding our web team, and we are looking to like diversify our online content. My editor told me that we've been approached or are in talks with Socialist Telly about a collaboration of some sort. I think it's like podcast style online shows and things like that. And I think there is a real thirst for that kind of content at the moment, you know, like more long form audio, because a lot of people are, you know, either stuck at home or doing other things. They want to listen to things rather than read, you know, while they're doing other things. And I think with the explosion of audiobooks, YouTube videos and, you know, things like that, podcasts, there is that hunger for that type of content, and I think that is the way that we should be going.
Oh, it's good to hear you're doing. There's a collaboration going on there. Well, I've got to move on because I'm not a good chair, and I let people talk too long, and then I'll get in trouble because I have about 3, 4, 5 people in 2 minutes. So cool. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to move on to. I think it's quite interesting this. The printed. Oh yeah, and everyone, please give Lamia a round of applause. And I'm moving on now to Peter Liu, who has been producing a newspaper for a few years. Peter, are you there?
Hi, Crispin.
I don't think that's your real name, is it? You can't be called.
No,
Mr.
we were
Lou.
organising the Peterloo 200th anniversary.
Oh, I
remember meeting
I know,
you.
but just so people know that your name isn't Mr.
It's Alan
Lou.
Davis. Yeah, I got stuck with it, and half people still call me Peter, which is okay. You know, Peterloo was a protest that needs remembering.
Now, we haven't got very long, but I'm just wondering if you could tell us, because you set up a newspaper.
Right. What we did, Chris, is we thought a printed press was more tangible. I think it gives you something that you can hold in your hand literally. And the idea was not to be Morning Star, because we think it's great what the Morning Star do, but do it from the opposite way around. Be a tabloid, have much more tabloid content. For instance, Chris Williamson of the Resist movement is our chef. He has a regular chef's page article in it. So kind of Jackie Walker writes, which does the television sort of review. So you can see by that what our politics must be like if those people do our kind of media pages. So the idea is to be printed. We printed it for the first 2.5 years of our existence. We started at the Tolpuddle Festival in 2016. And then we found that the people who distributed it, which were Trinity Mirror, also distributed the Morning Star, were less than honest, shall we say. They were Blairites. It wasn't really in their interest. So we took a break. We came back just before the next lockdown. So we've got our own distribution network, which we worked out. So we produce a weekly at the moment, 32-page tabloid, but we're going up to 64 pages very soon. The idea is just to be readable and drip feed left the way that the right-wing media drip feed you the other way. And it's not just the way the right-wing media do it in news programs, but they do it in every film, any Hollywood movie. They do it in everything. So you kind of walks in by osmosis. So we want to do the opposite.
And how much time does it take? And have you got the resources? Are you struggling funding?
We're all struggling for finance, all of us on the left, because we're a non-profit making cooperative. We're all volunteers. The only people we pay is the designers, and we are struggling. But what we do and what's different is that anyone can just go onto our website, thewordmedia.org, and there's a space on there which they can just put a story automatically into, and then we'll design it, and if it's good enough, put it into the paper. So it's a cooperative effort, and it's more people would be helpful, because the idea was a lot of people doing a little. And remember, we had 500,000, was it 600,000 members of the Labour Party? And just like to say, I've been suspended twice in the Labour Party, now resigned from it, and I almost feel like I'm floating on air with the freedom to say things.
Well, but you're not. Yeah, but you're not free to say it all on here, because I'm still in the Labour Party, and I know what they're like. They're watching everything.
I'll be quiet, mate. I'll be off.
Yeah. We've already mentioned a couple of names that might not have gone down too well with some.
Oh, my apologies.
Anyway, we won't go won't go on about that. But thank you for coming on, and good luck. And a round of applause, I think, for.
Thank you. And it's thewordmedia.org. If anyone wants to write for us, thewordmedia.org, please have a look on there.
Okay, we put it in the chat as well, and then we can. I'm going to move on to Paul Knaggs. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah. Hi, Crispy. Hello, everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. To be honest, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Getting a message across. Today we're a bit stuck, really, because the politicians that represent us, they've not got that vision that we can put across to the general public. Corbyn did a lot to generate that idea. He gave us a vision of what could be, how we could break a rig system. And when you're running a media outlet, you need a platform to put that out. You need to be able to have a vision that can be articulated to people. And there's a lack of it right now, to be quite honest. I understand that Starmer tomorrow is going to put out his vision of the Labour Party. That'll be nice to see. But for right now, it's about a lot of media outlets like Skwawkbox, myself, the Canary, the Word, and the Morning Star, which I think, I've followed it for years, putting out what's wrong with society. But we also need to put out a vision of how we can change society. And that's the hardest thing for me. We need to be like evangelists. We need not only to be putting this out on the platforms such as all the social media platforms that are left where we share our articles. We need to be going out into the wider world, and we need to take our argument to the people, because people want what we're selling. They just don't understand. And this is when we need to articulate it. And this is why we need our politicians to give us that vision so we can put out the word to people. And that's what we try to do on Labour Heartlands. I'm not one that takes subscriptions on, but I feel that people should do, because we've seen with the left-wing media, it can be taken down very quickly. We saw that with Skwawkbox, I hope they don't get taken down. We saw that with the Social Workers Party, how their platform was taken down very quickly. So we have to protect ourselves as well, and that's hard to do. I'm not sure if Patreon's the right way to go. I know I won't be doing that, because it takes my articles that I want to put out to people for free away from those people that can't afford to, pay subscriptions. We rely on donations, small donations. Sometimes it's just £1 and £2. It's really, I'm very grateful for it, because it does cost a lot, as people say, to have a media outlet. But to me, it's all about getting that message out, that socialist message. People want to understand what socialism is about. And if they can read the articles that articulate a different view, they'll buy into it. And that's where we're at.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on. I know you're busy as well. Round of applause, please, for Paul as well, for all he's doing. And I'd like to bring in another prolific social media operator, as you might, I don't know if that's the way you call it, someone who's on Facebook. Now, are you there, Jason? No, he's not there. Okay, so I'm going to go to Mike Phipps. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Thank you for coming on. Now you work for Labour Hub. You write for Labour Hub. What
Yep.
do you think? What do you think can be done to improve our coverage against this media bias?
I think first of all you have to understand the character of the problem. It's much bigger than people think. It's an international thing now. I mean, if you were part of the 1% internationally, you're sitting down thinking, how in democracies do we get the masses to vote for the 1%? How do we do that? It's not in their interest, so how can we gull them? And part of that is nationalism and populism and racism, and part of it is the use of the media. And the media is getting very sophisticated. It's not just the things that have been mentioned, but we're seeing very sophisticated operations like Cambridge Analytica, astroturfing. Take the COVID pandemic. You've got an organisation like Us For Them, which appears to be grassroots parents worried about the mental health impact of school students not being able to go to school on a regular basis. It's actually funded by big business concerns that are out to crack the teachers' union. And you get a lot of this in America. It's coming here now. Organisations which claim to be grassrootsy, but are actually astroturf, which are actually there to serve the interests of big business and so forth. So we've got to be wise to this. And we thought we were winning the battle in social media in 2017 when, on a shoestring, Momentum and some of the operations that we were running were doing brilliantly. But in 2019, we were blindsided. And there was some reports done at the time which showed that 80% of Tory election ads on people's Facebook feeds were lies. And the same research showed that none of the Labour ads on people's Facebook feeds were misleading. And yet, ironically, the BBC reported this as general election 2019 ads are untrustworthy, as though there was no difference between the parties. People say, oh, the BBC's biased. You can complain, and you should complain, because it's publicly funded. And the real issue with the BBC, you get individual journalists who are not very good at their job or who may be biased like Laura Kuenssberg, but the real issue is the tendency to follow the print media agenda. The print media is run by big business, and it's Tory, and it sets the agenda, and there's a tendency for the broadcast media, which is supposed to be neutral and independent, to play catch up and follow that agenda. And the big issue for us, I think, in 2019 was the way in which you know, you can attack Jeremy Corbyn or Michael Foot, but what happened with Jeremy Corbyn was quantitatively different. It was a campaign of delegitimisation, and it was run from within the government itself. This whole idea of getting military figures to go out there and say that Jeremy Corbyn was a threat to national security. The usual courtesies that the government extends to the leader of the opposition were not extended to Jeremy Corbyn. And the moment when the Tory party really turned on Theresa May was when she had to invite Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell in for discussion on Brexit to see if there could be any way through the deal, because that gave the game away. In one swoop, they had blown apart the delegitimisation strategy. The whole point was you cannot treat Jeremy Corbyn as a real leader of the opposition. And the BBC and the print media followed that. So we try and do our little bit on Labour Hub. Things are very polarised in the party at the moment, and on the organisational front, and understandably so. But on policy, I actually think there's a bit more give and take between the different sort of wings of the party, and we're trying to continue the conversation on policy. After a defeat, the main thing is to try and regroup, and not to turn on everybody and say it's all Owen Jones's fault or it's all John Lansman's fault or anyone else, but to try and regroup and bring people back together and have a discussion about policy that can actually advance things going forward. But look, going forward, I think the key thing is this. We've seen this Jeremy Corbyn project, the Project for Peace and Justice. And Len McCluskey was on the platform saying, yes, one of the big campaigns is going to be democratising the media and so forth. But, if Len McCluskey wanted, he could sit down with a number of other trade union leaders. And we don't have billionaires, it's true, but we have huge resources in the trade union movement. And they could put together an accessible, readable tabloid daily on a monthly basis. I distribute it. I get out, and we could get our ward members to get out there and put something through people's letterboxes on a regular basis. God knows we have to put out enough Labour propaganda for local councils saying, oh, aren't we working well with the police and stuff? But we'd actually put out a newspaper through people's letterboxes, because it's no good being in social media just talking to the same bubble. You've got to take the argument to people who are not in your bubble. That's the key thing. And I salute those who are doing that. And social media tends to be too much, talking to itself. We've got to get something out there. Some of these older red wall voters, they don't necessarily do much social media. We've got to, no wonder they have the views they have on certain issues when what they get through their letterbox on a daily basis is the Daily Express or whatever. We've got to get something out that challenges that. And it fits into the one lesson we draw from the 2019 general election, which is we've got to put our roots down deeper. We lost the red wall because the roots had disappeared. The trade unions were weakened after deindustrialisation of Thatcher and so forth. And we no longer had the roots in those communities in many parts of the country. And the lesson I draw from 2019 is put down more roots. The lesson Keir Starmer draws is put out more flags, but we've got to put down more roots. And that means getting our media out there into people's letterboxes to explain what's going on. And that way we might actually connect with people more, and there'll be an interaction with those people that we haven't had much connection with, and that can only be to the good. So that's how I see things going forward. And why can't the trade union do that? I'll deliver it. You put the money up, but you won't necessarily have editorial control.
You think we do have the money and resources there? We just have to make sure it's
we absolutely do. We are the Labour movement. We are huge. We've got 600,000 members in the party, although it's shrinking. The trade unions have got members going into the millions, but the leadership has always been unwilling to give the autonomy to a newspaper like that, because they're afraid of losing the kind of control that unfortunately trade unions have tended to operate with a kind of top-down approach. But attempts in the past, why not do it now? And particularly sections of the left-leaning trade union leaderships who claim to be on the right side of things, why are they sort of throwing up their hands in horror saying, oh my God, Andrew Neil and GB News? We can counter that. We can put something out, but it means you've got to give a good quality editorial team their head to produce a good quality newspaper. And unfortunately, Len McCluskey won't be the editor, and he won't have total control. And that's just the way life is, if it's going to be good and vibrant and appeal to people.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Good to see you again. Now I found Lizzie Fletcher, who produces Unity News. Are you there, Liz?
I am. Yes.
Hello. Good to see you. So how you've got quite a large following on Unity News. How do you think you can build on that, or how can we build?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm a member of Independent Media Association, which includes the Skwawkbox, the Canary, and Dorset Eye, and many, many others. And we I have one point that I'd like to speak about. I think it lies at the base of our problem with countering mainstream media bias. And of course, mainstream media are biased. They're biased towards all the other people that earn £200,000 a year. So we at independent media are citizen media, and we are biased towards all those who earn practically nothing. And this is actually where our strength lies, in being the voice of ordinary people. We tell the stories that you bring to us, that we see every day, and the stories that we live. If we were financially supported by ordinary people, we could do a lot more. Some of us, such as the Canary, are already partly funded by the public, but most of us are producing our media while holding down our ordinary job. Some of us are on benefits. I can't stress the importance of everybody's £2 a week, or whatever you donate to whichever indie media you choose to support. It enables us to investigate, produce and distribute our media. This in turn balances the media bias of the mainstream towards the workers, the ordinary people and the vulnerable. Demand indie media representation on your television, on your radio and in your newspapers. Keep requesting our presence in interviews and on your favourite shows. Keep sharing and retweeting our articles. Follow us, our groups and our personal feeds. Find out who runs Skwawkbox, Steve Walker. Follow him. Who runs Labour Heartlands, Paul Knaggs. Follow him. Request that he appears on the local show. Buy the Word, buy the Morning Star, buy the Red Pepper, buy Counterfire, buy the Tribune. Become patrons on Patreon. Together, we can tilt the bias that exists in mainstream media, who all earn 200 grand a year and don't give a damn about any of you, away from the privileged few and towards us, the people.
Oh, well, thank you. Round of applause for Lizzie. And you mentioned Dorset Eye. I'm going to move on to Jason from Dorset Eye. Are you there, Jason?
Jason, Debbie, yeah.
Hi, Jason. What do you think about what you've heard so far? Have you got any other ideas for how we can improve our media on the left and how we might be able to combat the bias?
Well, everybody's contribution so far has been spot on. It's great to follow on from Lizzie, and also previously from Mike. And Mike talked about the essence of being top down as being the problem. And we launched Dorset Eye in 2012 off the back of being told by people like Noam Chomsky and John Pilger at a conference in London that you need to completely move away from top down. You need to go from bottom up. So in essence, exactly as Lizzie just stated, that in effect, it's about allowing and empowering society to have their voice. And that's what Dorset Eye was all about. It's citizen media. So all of its content is determined by the public.
Right. So it's a sort of, you have local stories as much as national ones as well. Do you think the local stories could be a way that we can change things as well? Because the media locally doesn't seem to be so biased. They don't seem to have quite a handle on it. There's not as much money in local media, is there? So there's probably a greater chance of making a difference there, do you think?
I think it depends where you are. I mean, one of our early inspirations was the Leicester Mercury, and they had set up a side project which was all about citizen media. So the Leicester Mercury were a big inspiration for us, whereas if you come down to where we are with Dorset Echo, it's owned by an American corporation and it's all about the bottom line. It didn't start to involved local politicians until 2010 when we had Richard Drax elected, and he got a weekly column. We contacted the Echo and said, why didn't you have the previous Labour incumbent? Why wouldn't, oh, it's a new idea. Are you prepared to give an alternative voice? No, we're not at this time. So even regional newspapers, unfortunately, very much succumb to the neoliberal conservative project.
Right, yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on. Round of applause for Dorset Eye. I found you in the end. And I want to move up to from Dorset to Sedgefield in Durham. Are you there, Paul and Laura?
Yeah, we're here.
Hello.
So you've started up Socialist Thinktank. Is that during lockdown you started that?
Pretty much at the beginning of lockdown, yeah, we started to do it. It was an idea we had before lockdown, so it was meant to be audio podcasts only, but we started doing vodcasts and things, and it's kind of grown pretty rapidly what we're doing. Yeah.
And what do you think is missing on the left media that needs to be changed?
From my point of view, what I would like to see is I'd like to see collaboration, and people have mentioned this. So we've tried to collaborate with other groups. Obviously, like we've had you on our show, Crispin, and you've had us on our show, and that's like it's a really good model of collaboration because you share one another's audience and you let one another know about each other. And we've had Political Education Project come on our show. We've had Save Our Socialists, all these different groups, and it's really helped give one another a platform. So if we're going to be socialists in social media, it's got to be socialist media. It's got to be developed where we look after one another and encourage one another to go through and build an audience and get those ideas out there. One of the things I'd like to see is a kind of version of for these things that are going out. If we've got scheduled live shows, we need a left-wing version of the Radio Times. We need to have our own time slots. We need to be not stepping on one another's toes. Like I've in the past, I've moved a show from we've moved a show from a Sunday night to a Saturday night because we didn't want to get in the way of socialist telly. But then we've seen other shows kind of come under our slots, and maybe they don't know they're our slots. But we certainly shouldn't be stamping on one another's toes, whether that's deliberate or not. So whether that's an organisational problem where we haven't thought it through properly and haven't collaborated enough, or otherwise, it shouldn't happen. So I'd like to see, and we would be willing to host it actually as Socialist Think Tank, a diary of when things go out and encourage each other's audiences to watch each other, to like everything as well. That's the way social media works. You know, if even if you're just dropping a like onto a page, then maybe that puts it higher up the algorithm. That's the way we need to work. We've got this big body of people who can do things. So even if you can't watch a full show, come on, click like, make a comment, great show, something like that. It really does help. And I do try and do that with other social media platforms as well.
I think it's excellent what you've said. I mean, the Radio Times thing has come up a few times in the survey that was put out. People did say we need to know where things are. We don't know where all these shows are. There's so many people. We've just seen on this Zoom, we've had about 10 people who've spoken. There's so many people doing stuff. It's not as if we don't have the creativity, the talent, the energy. We just seem to be lacking the money and the infrastructure. So like you say, collaboration is almost, it's essential for that to succeed. What do you think about Laura, your turn, because there's two of you. Your turn. What do you think about the idea of a channel where we combine all the different shows and people putting different things together on one place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea certainly has its merits. I'd be worried about doing a channel sort of in terms of like a TV channel or anything like that, because I think one of the beauties of all of the people who've spoken tonight is that they're all independent and they're all very much grassroots. I think Paul's right in that if we can, we're all basically targeting similar audiences and we're trying to get our message out. If we can work together to show people where to go to find that message, it can be done from any one of our platforms, I think. And we, as I say, and as Paul has said, and yourself, working collaboratively is the key. The infrastructure, I feel like we can build together. There are a lot of us. There are thousands of us. If we all put in a little bit of work together, then the money becomes less of an issue. Because let's face it, we're never going to get the kind of money we need to take on the likes of the BBC. That's just not feasible. We haven't got a Rupert Murdoch in our back pocket, but we certainly can build an infrastructure and welcome people and help each other find their audiences and guide the audiences to them. I think that's one of the key things we need to be doing.
I mean, with a channel, I was thinking everyone would have an independent editorial control. So it would just be like ITV has different production companies, same the BBC does. So you could have, it wouldn't be like one uniform thing. If they all were on one place, then everyone would know where to go. But it's almost like the Radio Times, but a different kind of version of that.
It's interesting, that, Crispin, because if you think about it, if you've got one place that can be taken down, you can be under attack. That one place can come under attack. Our website is under constant attack. I don't honestly, like, there's Russian bots there all the time. They want to bring us down. If we had one place where all the socialist social media was, and it was going out of that, you could just attack that one. I don't think that's necessarily what we need to do. I think what we need to do is encourage everyone to build up every single platform. So if you like Socialist Telly, then you like Socialist Thinktank, then you like Labour Grassroots, then you like Dorset Eye, and you like all these different things. And sorry for anyone I didn't mention. I think that's the way forward. I think that is like building everyone up together is the way forward for this, and making sure that you've got those time slots in there. And then if one person, one team gets put under attack, and thank goodness we've got a brilliant person who's in charge of our website and internet security and stuff, because the attacks are constantly there. They don't want us to do this.
All right, well, we'll have to work out a platform that can't be attacked then. What I was thinking is, I actually got a message. I did try and get Momentum to come on, but it was a bit late for them to come on. But I just did notice, this is what I was told by Momentum. Last year, Momentum's video content reached 29 million individuals and received 91 million views on Facebook. They have a kind of coordinated approach to getting posts out and being shared. So it is possible, if we build that with more content, that we could reach, like it says, 29 million individuals in it, which is pretty good. Anyway, it's 8:30 now, and it's come to the time where I'm going to go back to Hilary, and then we'll have some contributions from the virtual floor. Hilary, are you there?
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry to cough myself out.
No, that's all right. You did it was very well timed coughing. It's like you prompted me. So
anyway, I just think everybody's been really brilliant and inspiring, and they've all, I think this emphasis on collaboration is key. I mean, I'm not so opposed. I understand Laura and Socialist Think Tank's wariness about a single point, but it can be constructed. I think this idea of a kind of modest version of Channel 4, where everybody has, independent editorial control, but there's a channel, a single channel. I mean, that can be done in a flexible way so that, if it was under attack, it can be either protected or people can dissolve into their separate autonomous forms of production and connect in the way that you describe. But I think that if we're talking about accessibility, and I think Mike's point about putting down roots, it depends on accessibility. I mean, I don't think the way forward is a trade union sponsored newspaper. I think if we collaborate on and develop a concept of some kind of media form that builds on our independence, because our strength is in our different unique capacities. So Red Pepper does something completely different from what Skwawkbox does, but Skwawkbox is completely brilliant at what it does, and Red Pepper is, well, I mean, I hope good at what it does, and the different combinations of these skills is what we want, and some kind of model of coordination but independence is what we need. And I think that if we collaborated, then we could go to the unions for not just financial support, but also promotional support. Like, will you promote this channel to every member. I mean, you've got to, I think the other thing, let's be realistic about the unions. Okay, they've got a huge membership, but actually that membership is very inactive. I mean, we all know as trade union members ourselves how rarely branches meet, you know, so that's not a sort of active membership that's going to react it quickly to a newspaper through the door. That'll probably be junked. But if there's a channel that's attractive where we have the best, you know, direct, I mean, you know, the left has got fantastic, you know, people. It's got Ken Loach, it's got different editions, it's got some of the best creators on the scene. And if those people who would collaborate, I'm sure, you know, they want to strengthen the left, and they've shown that. And if we all collaborated with our different skills, and somebody like Crispin has shown that he has the skill of curation, you know, so, I mean, and maybe the Socialist Telly people too, I mean, there's a skill of production, which the different, you know, Skwawkbox, Morning Star, Dorset Eye and so on. And also just building on Dorset Eye, there's a plethora of different local initiatives, creative initiatives, like Bristol Cable, Manchester Meteor, and this developing something from below out of frustration, you know, pure anger, creative anger at the state of the media has meant there's this creative buzz from below. And so there's all this creative production. And then we need people like Crispin and the Socialist Telly who've got the capacity for curation and coordination. And then we can, I think, get support from the unions to back us.
So you've got to, you envisage a sort of process of creating something and then asking for funding when it's been shown to be effective.
Yes, when it's been shown that we can collaborate. I think, you know, it's quite difficult getting individual unions to support different. I mean, they used to just automatically sign checks to the Morning Star or the New Statesman, and now they know they've got to reach an audience that is bigger than any one of us together. And if we can show how to do that with technical and imaginative skills that they lack, you know, without being rude, I think they would be supportive of something. I think that's more realistic than asking them to start a socialist newspaper.
Yeah. Oh well, that's great. Thank you for staying on the show and listening to the chat, and for introducing it, and for being so good with your cough as well. I'm going to. We've got quite a few people who've got their hands up, virtual hands, and I'm going to. I thought we could have some contributions from the floor, so to speak, before we go on to our social event, which is where we all feel better, for even knowing that we're dominated by a biased media. I'm going to start with alphabetically the first person, Chet. Are you there, Chet?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can. Do you have a particular point that you've picked up, or do you like to say to people about what's happening, what we're talking about?
30 seconds, multiple points. So first of all, Peterloo has asked to put a link onto chat. Chat's been disabled since then, so he's not been able to. It'd be lovely to see a whole list of all the different contributing online magazines here, which would be very helpful. But I'll leave that one with you. The other thing is, in terms of the unions, I think, certainly for my own, we're sitting there wanting to spend money on something that's contributing, and right now there's nothing. We can't sponsor leaflets or anything. So if half of the branches around the country were to buy one subscription in the mags, I think that could be a real contributor. So it's just a suggestion that is encouraged.
All right, well, that's great. I didn't know that chat was not working. Sorry about that. I'll try and work out what that is. Thank you. And Christine and Norman, you're the next people I can see. Yeah.
Hello, yeah, it's Norman here. It made me smile when I heard the Socialist Thinktank people talk about a left-wing Radio Times, because I first came to London in 1979 with the idea of setting up a left-wing, well, Radio Times, TV Times, because you had to have both in those days to get all the coverage. We did produce that in 1982. It was called TV Choice, the first TV Choice, not the one you see in the newsagents now. It lasted for about 8 months or so, and then came flaming down to earth. Years later, we came to Thanet, and we produced a magazine for Thanet, a local magazine, which we basically used in the end to try to stop Nigel Farage winning the seat of South Thanet, and we played a big part in stopping him. We had a local magazine to help counter the media bias in his favour. But what I would contribute to this is that I think the best hope we've got, and there are lots of brilliant ideas we've heard, is what you're doing, Crispin, which is not the Andrew Marr show. But what we need is a local version of that in every local area, and left-wing groups who are active in these areas need to set them up using the wonders of Zoom technology. But what they need to do also, which is what you can't really do in a national show such as yours, is to really major on local issues. There are local issues, because we don't want to end up in a situation where we're just talking to ourselves or just to other left-wing people or having factional punch-ups. We need to take on the left-wing issues, the national health, housing, whatever the big issues are for that area, the green spaces, environmental issues. We need to bring people in of all kinds into those meetings, into those debates, and get them arguing with other people about what the way forward is, because that's the way the left in general has got to go. It's got to engage with the community, and obviously it does in areas where the left is successful, and we must use the media, local media, to do that, linked to obviously lots of other local media, a local website, that kind of thing. So I think that's the way forward. I think you showed a great initiative in the Not the Andrew Marr show, having entertainment as well as politics, having at the heart of it debate. You see the way that debates pull people in. As long as you choose the right subject, people will come in large numbers. And if you advertise it in the area through the social media, you will get people to come in to argue about what they're worried about, which is usually things to do with their local community. So I think that's the way forward, and we will be trying to do that in South Thanet. We will set up a Zoom station here where we will be pulling in people and arguing for the next debate, for the next election, for whatever it is, but we will be basically getting into a community campaign of some kind with a Zoom debate. But thanks, Crispin.
No, it's fine. I think the lockdown and what's happened since last year has given us an opportunity to use this technology. I would never have ever talked to someone on a video thing like this before we had to do it. So it's actually been quite positive. Now, Rachel, you put your hand up quite early.
Thank you. Hello. I'd like to start by echoing what Paul and Nora were saying about the difference between coordination and the centralised point. I think that what they've said about collaboration and cooperation and building a network is an excellent proposal that we should support. But to add to their point about the risk of centralising, it's not just physical attacks, as it were, trying to take down the site that we'd be at risk of. But if we're all in one place, it's easy for the mainstream to disparage us, and we end up, those lefties, we don't have to listen to them. That doesn't, they're just irrelevant. Of course, they'd say that. So by centralising, we do run a risk. But the Radio Times idea is also excellent, so that we can coordinate, so that we can be a more effective network. And I was wondering about how we define ourselves as members of that network. Perhaps, just as a suggestion, we have statements of principles, openness, accountability, transparency, that we invite people to sign up to, like a pledge that says, these are the things that we stand for, this members of this network, if we want to identify as such. Say what we're for rather than what we're against. Right. Okay. So there's a lot you said there. I'm getting a little bit frazzled by this, but yeah, the cooperation is really important.
I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about this telly channel idea. I mean, if you had one telly channel and it worked, we could have two. Why can't we have two telly channels? Then they can take one down. We can have another one. It's a bit ambitious, perhaps, but I think we have enough people out there who are interested in being creative and doing other things. So I'm going to move on to Anne. Are you there, Anne?
Oh yeah, I am. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things, but also to say I love the idea of a TV listings paper, and I would definitely buy that. You know, and that could be something really great to build on. The two things I wanted to add is that a couple of years before we began with this pandemic, I noticed that the local newspaper was centrally owned now by somewhere way up north. I'm down in the southeast. Lots of local newspapers have been bought up, you know, the ones that freebies that come through the door and what have you, yeah. All owned by one central company. And they were appealing for local stories and what have you. And I thought, you know, what a great opportunity that might be for someone who's, you know, a bit of a scribe to send, perhaps, you know, not inundate every week, but just to put some really good local left-leaning Labour Party at the heart stories forward for those papers to publish, you know, sort of things on local issues. So I thought that was one idea, and to look into your local paper, who owns them? Are they generally, you know, are they actually local? Do they want letters? Do they want articles?
Yeah,
and
well, they are owned by big companies, aren't they? That own them all, and they don't have very many staff, and they try to run them at the bare minimum of skeleton staff. And
that might be something that we can roll with and make use of in the meantime while we're getting our own things perhaps more established. The second thing is really adult education, really. Obviously not at the moment, but when things are a bit more, you know, sort of steady and safe out there, maybe we could have in local areas a set of classes, you know, perhaps one every couple of months on basic issues such as basic economics, basic politics, social history, feminism, you know, just local sort of the sort of subjects that we used to get back in the 70s, you know, with the consciousness raising, etc. And just so that there's an opportunity for people who want to learn, even members of the Labour Party, you know, who joined on the back of the new thrust in 2017 and 2019, might not actually know very much about these things, and therefore are easily vulnerable to being persuaded by other perspectives. Yeah. So I just wondered, you know, that, you know, we might be able to make use of people that we know who work in universities or schools, you know, who are good at teaching, who might be able to do, you know, one class a year or something, and just get a rolling group thing.
Yeah, well, that's a great idea. I mean, education's part of the whole thing, really.
Yeah.
I do this. We've been doing this Castaway show with different people on there talking about their favourite songs and books, and I've learned lots from just that, because I don't know a lot. I mean, sometimes education can seem quite heavy, but then if it can be presented in a different way, it might be easier to do that. Right, I'm going to. We've got so many people here. Let me just move on to Vanda, whose name I can pronounce now properly. Are you there, Vanda?
Yeah, thank you very much.
And you wrote to me about a local initiative you're doing.
Yeah, I set up Wake Up Gloucestershire on Facebook a while ago to try and get people who are not in the Labour Party interested. There's articles on all sorts of things that Gloucestershire people are interested in, like, you know, the climate change and health before COVID, coincident in health and that. So, and amongst all of that, you put the political stuff in, certainly anti-Tory stuff, and the message is slowly getting across. But what we really need is Labour Party supporters to join these groups and share this information publicly. There's so much really, really good information that's kept in closed groups, so we're just talking to ourselves. We need to break out of these bubbles and just make the information accessible to other people. People need to put them on their own pages, share them amongst their friends and families, Politics is really, really important. It affects our lives. People need to understand that. And my final point really is really, really important. Get the message across to people that the media is biased. As we all know this, don't we? We've been talking about it all evening. But the media is controlled by billionaires, and they want people to vote in their interest, not in our own interests. And we just have to break out. I've got members of my CLP, left-wing members, don't trust the Canary, don't trust Skwawkbox, and they trust the BBC. I mean, that's absolute madness. We really have to break this wall down and get the message across. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vanda. And I'm just going to bring in Stan. You've been there for a while. I'm not sure if you're still there. Are you still there, Stan? Not sure if Stan put his hand up by mistake. I will just talk to Una Doyle, sorry. Are you there? Are you there? Hello? You're on, Una? Oh, Una's not responding. So I'm going to move back to Hilary's come back on. This is interesting. What's Hilary got? Hilary, are you there?
I'm scared that we're going to lose. You know, we've got so many ideas, and it could just get sort of diffuse and lost, and we all go away buzzing, but with nothing concretely agreed. And so I'm wondering whether it's always best to kind of start modest, and then you never know what will happen. And so I think that why don't we agree? It seems like there's biggest consensus around the Radio Times idea, the sort of coordination, and if we work together on that, and then we could, you know, you could reconvene this meeting and we could say, okay, how's that going? How should we move a bit further? So we kind of, rather than just, you know, let these ideas float, if we had some agreement, so I'd go back to Red Pepper and report back this and say, let's publicize it, let's get in touch. I mean, our organizer is based in Durham, so she could get in touch with Laura and the Socialist Thinktank, and they could work together. And then similarly, you know, everybody else here, Morning Star, could publicize it, and you know, Crispin, you could sort of give it straight oomph. And so we got going on that. Then we met again and said, okay, is there the next, out of all these ideas, which maybe you're jotting down, what else could we do together? And then we gradually consolidate, and maybe more will come out of it. Anyway.
Great idea, and a great conclusion to the whole discussion, I think. So it's great that everyone has come forward. Sorry, John, you've left your hands up, and I think we'll leave it with Hilary's excellent final contribution.
The people's flag is deepest red. It's shrouded oft down water dead, and ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, their heart's blood dyed its every fold. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. It waved above our infant might, when all ahead seemed dark as night. It witnessed many a deed and vow, we shall not change its colour now. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. And it well recalls our triumphs past, gives us hope of peace at last. This banner bright and symbol plain of human rights and humanity's gain. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer. We keep the red flag flying here. Raise the scarlet standard high. Beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer.